So good afternoon, everyone, and Chris, thank you for that introduction, and thanks to you and Ann and Greg for putting on this terrific conference, and welcome to all of you to Boston and this program. It's my great pleasure at this point to interview Mark Benjamin, the head of Nuance, and Mark is in the process of transitioning from New Jersey with his family. And so, Mark, maybe we could start by just having you tell us about your background and what brought you to Boston. Sure. and Nuance.
Sure. Well, thank you for hosting us today. It's a pleasure to be here. As we waited, Peter offered me his room in his basement as I prepared to move to Boston. But my background, I've spent roughly about 30 years within technology and services company and applied technology companies. I joined Nuance as the CEO about 1 year ago. I knew Nuance as a customer of some of their solutions, both from some experience with a physician practice management company, an EHR company, as well as in a client engagement services business where Nuance provides call center, voice, and IVR solutions. So, Nuance to me was a very well-known and well-respected name, and certainly the opportunity to run what we believe is really one of the largest AI companies was just a great opportunity.
Mm-hmm. As Chris alluded to, our hospital has been a longtime user of your product, particularly in radiology, where voice recognition we were one of the early adopters of voice recognition and continue to use it extensively. Could you give us sort of an overview of this range of products, sure, industries that Nuance is currently involved in?
Sure. So Nuance serves multiple industries with its voice, speech-enabled, and conversational AI solutions. Our largest business is within the healthcare industry. So all of you know our solutions such as Dragon, such as PowerScribe, PowerShare, among some of the large solutions serving healthcare. We serve a large segment of the auto industry. So our solutions go out in newly manufactured autos. We have about 200 million cars on the road today using our voice-enabled AI within the car across all brands, Chinese brands as well, based on the prior panel. We serve the client engagement market, so call centers that your world's largest financial institutions, your credit card companies, your airlines. When you call into those centers and you're conversing with a robot or AI solution, there's a good chance that that's our solution. Also voice biometrics, so anyone using your voice as your password today, that's our solution across the market. So those are really the core industries that we serve. Our history is about 30 years, focused originally on speech recognition technologies, and we've evolved, say, over the last decade and a half, as a true AI company, developing conversational AI with neural net, capabilities. One of the things that when I joined and learned the history of Nuance, I was pretty upset with our marketing department because we've really been practicing AI for almost 30 years, but we just never thought to call ourselves an AI company, and I think that would have been good for our multiple. But anyway, here I am with you, and
great,
thrilled to be here.
Well, drilling into healthcare and some of your thoughts and activities in that area, I mean, we've seen over the last couple of decades the remarkable digitization of healthcare, paper records largely being a thing of the past, and electronic health records sort of taking over the world. But one of the unintended consequences is that physicians and other clinicians find themselves as overly educated, frustrated I/O devices, spending a lot of time getting information into and out of the record, and not as much time as they would like actually focusing on patients and taking care of them. How is Nuance focused on that problem?
Well, if I could, the real issue that you're pushing on is we've created a system that's put the physician and the clinicians really the burden upon them. And as we've raced to digitize health records and remove the paper, as you mentioned, and the consequences, and again, I wouldn't be the first person likely from this stage to talk about burnout, physician burnout, and the downstream impacts of that. But it's really risen at this point, to epidemic levels, within the healthcare industry, really on a worldwide basis. So, when you were considering going pre-med, if you asked 100 physicians today, would you recommend the practice of medicine? 70 out of 100 today would not recommend it. And that would be a pretty alarming data point. We see burnout having impacts on medical error rates. We see burnout creating mental health issues among physicians, and suicide rates climbing. So we see all these, I think, consequences of that unintended consequence around our race to put technology in the system. It's impacting attrition among the physician population today, so access to care. And it's not just one reason. It's not just technology that's really created some of this burden. It's regulation, it's compliance that has really put physicians on the front lines spending about 2/3 of their day handling clinical documentation and paperwork. And that comes in the form of not just papers, but hundreds of millions of clicks and pull downs and drop downs and alerts that all of you or many of you know quite well. So if I also told you when you were considering med school, Peter, that for every 1 hour of practicing medicine, you're going to spend 2 hours on administration and documentation that would be required to remain compliant. And of course, you need to make sure the reimbursement's right, the quality scores are accurate, severity, a whole host of different things get included in that. And it's not really the practice of medicine anymore. So we serve around 600,000 physicians every day at Nuance. So we really know what's happening with our customers. So the burnout issue is very real. We have to solve for it. It's impacting enrollments at medical schools. And it really is what we view as the number one issue. And we have to solve it at the front line. And we can talk about ways to do that. Dr. Ting, your Dr. Ting, gives a great airline analogy when talking about the burden that's been put on the physicians today, the administrative burden. And he analogizes to airline pilots sitting in the front of a plane that their job is to fly safely their 300 passengers to a location. And I won't do him justice, so I'll apologize in advance. But if you envision distracting those two pilots responsible for the safety of that flight with not only their pre-flight checklist, but making sure that they boarded the 300 passengers, if they made sure that catering was handled, if the plane had been cleaned, if the ground crew had done their maintenance checks and fuel, it goes on and on. He does a very articulate job, unlike me right now, essentially talking about the distractions and the burden put on physicians. And it's a perfect analogy. And so what we're seeing is really grassroots efforts to improve the life and day-to-day life of physicians and clinicians and the whole ecosystem around nursing, coding, what have you. At Partners, you have Kittyhawk, the Kittyhawk Project, focused on that. At Hopkins, they have the Joy of Medicine. And so this isn't just Nuance talking to our customers. We're seeing this in the market where this is a very large problem. It hasn't gone away because we've talked about it from stages like this for years. But we're at, I think, a critical point, a tipping point, if you will.
So perhaps you could describe what Nuance vision is for trying to help there and how artificial intelligence fits into that vision.
Sure. So, the patient-physician interaction, so in the exam, what was once a face-to-face conversation and relationship, has really evolved to a lot of keyboard clicking and typing and note-taking. So what we've been able to do, I think, rather successfully, and it's still early innings for us, is essentially offer conversation into the workflow for the physician. So whereby we can remove the keyboard, we can remove the screen, and we could turn the chair back to the patient in the exam room by using the technology to essentially capture that physician-patient interaction at a very high accuracy and quality rate, where it can be quite efficient. It can start to return time back, not just to the exam, which is a relevant part of why patients will return, but to also make sure that we get the clinical diagnoses and follow-up and test requirements and other things accurate the first time. Because a lot of this rework, and Peter, you know this, a lot of this is rework that happens post-care, where there's data missing, there's elements not found, and not to mention reimbursements are only driven by what you document, not by what you do. And the same thing with severity and scores and what have you. So using conversational AI, early days it was speech recognition, and now it's really moved very mainstream to our solutions. Examples of that, and again, we take that exam and we chunk it up into really small bites. So we look at it almost in 9 and 10 second increments. So every 9 seconds is about 1% of that exam time with a physician. So assuming it's roughly about a 15-minute examination time with the physician. So we look at opportunities every 1% in those increments, where ordering tests may take 2 or 3 minutes when using a keyboard and a mouse and drop-downs. We essentially enable the physician today to order tests with voice where it's seconds, and we have capabilities for nurses to use voice to document triage notes in minutes versus tens of minutes. So our opportunity really is that for every 1 hour, the 2-hour example is to really give you back those 2 hours in a very large way, and that's through our technology.
So I used to practice internal medicine and before the days of significant EHRs, but what you're describing is being able to get rid of the keyboard and basically allow the doctor and the patient just to talk again, with the doctor being able to focus in on what's on the mind of the patient and developing that relationship. At the end of that session, using your vision, using the technology, what output is available to the physician? What does the system produce? Well,
that's what really has me most excited, going back to why I joined, but as many of you probably were at HIMSS just recently down in Orlando, the technology is obviously moving very rapidly, and you're seeing it here at the forum over these last couple of days. It's really hard to find a bad idea happening relative to technology, AI or not. But at HIMSS, we showcase what we refer to as our live exam room, or more technically, our ambient clinical intelligence solution, where what we don't just predict, but what we have coming to market is that exam room is really a live room, listening to the interaction, knowing the physician, knowing the patient, knowing the interaction, documenting it as we do today with our solutions, but actually creating the note. So literally clinical documentation that writes itself. And it's not just taking the conversation and it's not referencing words, it's actually learning, it's using clinical language understanding. And the note, for those of you that sat through the demonstration in Orlando, I sat through it about 30 times, I'll tell you why, not just because I like it. But the note gains confidence as the conversation with the physician continues to happen in the exam. It includes pulling up charts, looking at medical history. So as the conversation between you and me may happen, the note's getting written. And we see that as a massive opportunity to reduce waste, reduce rework, capture everything at point of care. Because once the patient leaves the exam room, you know this better than me, any follow-up work, any misdirection, any labs that weren't ordered at the point of care, you have a great reduction in patient case management. and not to mention a whole host of other things. So we're super excited about a live exam room, essentially that documents itself.
Mm-hmm. So using natural language processing and AI to create notes to take care of billing for the physicians, I mean, that sounds like a huge step in the right direction. What about also helping with the medical content of the visit? If a physician, for example, the system may have a better sense as to what's going on with the patient than the physician might. Are you thinking about providing real-time decision support to the physician so that they ask a key question or do something differently that can improve the overall care?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, the documentation isn't for invoicing purpose. It really is for case management and creating the clinical note, if you will. By the way, all embedded within the EHR, so there's really no rework required or double, triple entry required that we see in systems today. The ability to add other layers of AI onto that solution is already happening with us today. So we're able to add, and what we really, we enhance the intelligence at the point of care, while relying on the physician intelligence and the interaction there to be the base, and then layering in whether it's support decisions or other type of, intelligence real time to make sure that nothing's really getting missed. You mentioned the invoicing. That's, we're embedded in the EHR community today, and the EHR is an incredibly valuable tool, but it's not very popular today because I think physicians tend to struggle with the actual clinical application of using an EHR, and it's unfortunately more of an invoicing tool than it's intended. So, I think nothing we do at Nuance doesn't focus on point of care with the provider of the care in the workflow of the provider, because it has to be real time to be valuable and not create downstream work.
Mm-hmm. So just thinking ahead a few steps, you could imagine that if indeed you have or could develop the clinical decision support to help guide the physician in the interview real time, perhaps the next step would be no physician at all. Yeah. Is that something that you envision any time down the road?
Yeah, no, that's not our vision. That's not our goal. Our goal is really, to enhance the life of the physician that's practicing medicine. Going back to the, example or pseudo example I would use with you, considering pre-med and all the aspects of what you do today to practice medicine. We think there's an extreme opportunity there, and most of my 30 years, with applied technology such as this has been where we have growing industries. Healthcare is growing every year. It's the largest percentage of most countries' GDP today, defined as cost. And so with growth comes a lot of low-value work that gets added over time. And and we believe that preserves the high-value work by having, other departments, new technologies handle the low-value work. But unless there's a real shift and an integration of those solutions to entirely remove the low-value work and focus back on high value, we end up with a bit of a situation we have in the ecosystem today. Very low interoperability, not a lot of great integration, and again, most of the work is happening post-care, and where we sit, which we think is a very valuable, important part of improving physician life, is at point of care, because you want to treat me and go on with your day, and not come back in a week or two when you get a question from another department, say, well, when you met with Mark, symptoms like this, how did they present? And that's hard.
Right. And I'm curious, this technology sounds incredibly exciting, could help put the care, or keep the care in healthcare. What do you see as being the biggest obstacles to advancing this vision? Is it the technology development? Is it the complexity of the adoption? What what do you worry about the most in that regard?
I think, as in anything, it's the focus. I think it's the willingness to take, I think, incremental risks along the way. I don't believe it's, there's no silver bullet here. There's no one shot that's going to really solve this in one big bite. And I think that's in many reasons why we're still talking about this and the problems only worsen. So, why we're excited about what we're able to do today, it is going to be a bit of a journey. And again, we also believe that augmenting the intelligence for the physician and the clinician providing the care is a very important balance, because we're not in the business of replacing the care. We're just really in the business of bringing back the care. I think it will evolve. I think AI for us is highly specialized. So there's not a, boil the ocean approach with us. Jensen yesterday, talked about the American College of Radiology and the AI platform that Nuance launched with NVIDIA. And that's just a great example of how we can accelerate the AI applications and the algorithms that come from many different sources to serve 70–80% of the radiologists today. Now, again, there has to be controls. I think there has to be, proper risk audit, which I know exists in the industry, but we're very interested in that part because we're serving our customers, such as partners and others. We're not a company that's looking to get data to then monetize that in different ways. That's not the business we're in.
So we've gotten a couple of very good questions from the audience that I wanted to try to run by you. One is in this vision of doctor and patient talking and the system developing the node. Question is, will the providers review what is documented and sign off on it? What are the implications for malpractice? Who bears the liability responsibility?
Yeah, who asked that question? I'm kidding. So certainly the provider will always be required to sign off on their note on their work. So this isn't this is not to replace the physician or the accountability of the physician. I think, we look at the documentation essentially being a review by the physician of what's been documented, from the natural conversation, and essentially having edit rights and authorization rights 100%. I would say, malpractice is, a real life part of what we do here in the field that we serve. But I would tell you that accuracy improvement, physician-patient exchange, documentation improvement will obviously, we believe, have downward pressures on that exposure.
Mm-hmm. Another question that I know has come up in some of the other sessions is, how do you ensure that biases of various forms don't get embedded within the system?
Well, that's a great question, and I think that was my underlying point as far as how we use AI today, because we use our customers' AI to make our customers' solutions and operability within their practices better. So I think keeping very precise and direct points of how do we solve this problem, what are the data requirements to do that, and how do you train the algorithm better. And again, we also believe that humans are the ones training the solutions. And other discussions around deep learning and how data ultimately may become less relevant, the solutions could begin to train themselves. While I'm not here to talk about that today, I think that's something certainly far down the road. We have, I think, some increments ahead of us where the existing data and the evolving data coming from 300 million patient stories a year that we collect data on for our customers, that's the really useful data, making the solutions smarter each day, and again, bringing back patient time for the physician.
And another question came from somebody who, like me, attended the excellent lunchtime cafe session on disease management, during which several of the speakers commented that they didn't think that natural language processing was ready for prime time for a lot of the use cases in healthcare that are being talked about. What's your sense of the state of the art of that?
I'm glad I didn't go to that one, because I obviously don't agree. So I was on the last mile session with one of our associates. I think our solutions, our clinical language understanding and natural language processing understanding solution has accuracy rates in the upper 90s, so-called 97, 98, 99%, based on certain specialty. So we've been at this a long time, again, multiple decades, and I would argue that Nuance is well past those kinds of measurements that essentially disqualify or dequalify our abilities. When you get a walk-up solution that you can rate in the 96+%, 95+% accuracy rate, that's a solution that's considered high accuracy and people will use. But the sensitivity to that, if you start to fall into the low 90s, you'll have very little acceptance of this audience using a solution like that. Plus, again, because you put me on the spot on that question, we have around a 98% customer satisfaction rating, meaning customers continue to use our product and would endorse our product. So we feel pretty good about that number.
Okay. We just have a few minutes left, and I'd turn to you and see if there are any final points or issues you wanted to cover.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the basis of the discussion and the focus on practicing medicine. And we believe, not because we think so, but we're serving a large majority of the industry, certainly within North America and parts of Europe, where this physician issue around burnout is very real. It's not going to go away anytime soon. And we're focused on that opportunity using conversational AI. Conversational AI is the largest use of AI today, full stop. So we think it's an opportunity to really continue to evolve and get all of the physicians back to practicing medicine and away from their computer screens, away from their keyboards. Because certainly that's not the art of medicine.
Great. Well, Mark, thank you to you and your colleagues from Nuance for helping make this conference possible, and thank you for your thoughtful comments that have added to the conversation today. And I guess in the spirit of trying to make healthcare more efficient, Chris, we're going to give you back a minute and a half in time. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.